Marcus Cole had grease under his fingernails and debt collectors on his back, and he figured that was about all life had planned for him until the day he died. He worked the scrapyards of Nexus Station, a spinning heap of metal and desperation floating at the edge of nowhere. And every morning he woke up in his tiny room and wondered if today would be the day his luck finally ran out completely. He was a mechanic third generation, which meant his grandfather had fixed ships, and his father had fixed ships, and now Marcus fixed ships too. Though fixed was a generous word for what he did most days, since his job was really about tearing dead vessels apart and selling their guts to whoever would pay. The aliens who ran the hegemony looked down on humans, called them primitive and short-lived and barely worth noticing. And maybe they were right, since humanity had only been in space for a few hundred years, while other species had been sailing the stars for millennia. But Marcus did not care much about galactic politics or ancient history, because he had bills to pay and a rusted cargo hauler called the Persistence that needed fuel. And yes, he knew he had spelled the name wrong, but he had been tired when he painted it, and now it was too late to fix. On the day everything changed, his crew chief sent him into the belly of a ship that should not have existed. The Valkyrie dreadnought had appeared in the salvage zone 3 days earlier, drifting out of deep space like a ghost. And every scientist and historian in 12 systems had lost their minds, because the Valkyrie had vanished centuries ago, and nobody knew where they went or why they left. The ship was massive, nearly 2 kilometers long, and its hull was made of some kind of living metal that shifted colors when you looked at it too long. And Marcus had to admit it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, even if it was technically a corpse. His job was simple enough in theory. Go to the lower decks, catalog anything valuable, mark it for extraction, and try not to touch anything that might kill him, since alien technology had a habit of doing that to curious humans. The upper levels were already picked clean by the senior crews, the ones with better connections and fancier equipment, so Marcus got what was left, which was dark corridors and strange smells, and the constant feeling that something was watching him. He worked alone because that was how he preferred it. Just him and his toolkit, and the quiet hum of his suit keeping him alive. And for 6 hours he found nothing but corroded plating and dead power lines that crumbled at his touch. Then he found the door. It was different from the others, larger and covered in symbols that seemed to glow faintly, even though there was no power running to this section. And when Marcus pressed his hand against it, he felt a vibration travel up his arm and settle somewhere behind his eyes. The door did not open so much as it dissolved, the metal flowing apart like water, and beyond it was a chamber that took his breath away. The room was vast and circular, with walls that curved upward into darkness, and in the center sat a pod the size of a shuttle, connected to the ceiling and floor by cables as thick as his body. A faint blue light pulsed inside the pod, steady as a heartbeat, and Marcus knew immediately that something was alive in there. He should have called it in right then, should have reported it to his crew chief and let the experts handle it. But something stopped him, something he could not name. A feeling deep in his chest that said this was meant for him. He approached the pod slowly and wiped away centuries of dust from its surface. And what he saw inside made him forget how to breathe. It was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen, a being of living metal and scales that shimmered with trapped starlight, with wings folded tight against its body and a long serpentine neck curved in sleep. A dragon, his mind whispered, because that was the only word that fit, even though he knew it was not really accurate, since this was an alien being from a species that had existed before humans learned to make fire. The old stories called them guardians, protectors bonded to the Valkyrie ruling class, creatures of immense power that had vanished along with their creators. And here was one still alive after all this time. But something was wrong. Marcus could see it now. The way the cables connected to the pod were fused and melted. The way the creature's limbs twitched in distress. the way its eyes moved behind closed lids in what looked like pain. The pod's systems were failing, had been failing for who knew how long, and the creature was trapped, unable to wake up and unable to die, stuck in a nightmare that had lasted for centuries. He called it in then, reported what he had found, and within hours the chamber was filled with experts and scientists and officials, who spoke in hushed tones about the discovery of the millennium. They examined the pod with their fancy instruments and their advanced algorithms and their centuries of accumulated knowledge. And one by one they all reached the same conclusion. The neural chains connecting the Guardian to the pod were corrupted beyond repair. The damage was too extensive, the technology too advanced, and there was nothing anyone could do. The creature would die with the ship. Marcus listened to them talk, and he watched them shake their heads, and he felt something hot and angry building in his chest because they were wrong. They had to be wrong, and he was not going to let this creature die alone in the dark. When the experts left to file their reports and argue about who owned the remains, Marcus stayed behind. He sat down next to the pod, and he opened his toolkit, and he looked at the tangled mess of alien technology that everyone said was impossible to fix. "All right," he said to the sleeping creature, "let us see what we can do here." And then Marcus Cole, a nobody mechanic with grease under his fingernails, went to work on a problem that had defeated the greatest minds in the galaxy. Marcus worked for 3 days without sleep, surviving on stale ration bars and cold coffee. And somewhere around hour 40, his hands started shaking so badly he had to tape his fingers together just to hold his tools steady. The neural chains were unlike anything he had ever seen. A fusion of organic tissue and crystalline circuitry that seemed to change shape when he was not looking directly at it. And every time he thought he understood how it worked, the whole system would shift and he would have to start over. The experts had been right about one thing. This technology was far beyond human understanding, far beyond anything the hegemony had ever produced. And by all logic, Marcus should have failed just like everyone else. But Marcus did not think like the experts. He did not see an impossible alien system that defied comprehension. He saw a machine, and machines followed rules, even if you did not understand what those rules were. And if something was broken, then there had to be a way to fix it. He talked while he worked, partly to keep himself awake and partly because the silence of the chamber was too heavy to bear alone. He told the sleeping creature about his life, about growing up on Nexus Station with a father who drank too much and a mother who left when he was 7, about learning to fix things because broken machines were easier to understand than broken people. He talked about his dreams of seeing the galaxy, dreams that had faded into the daily grind of survival, and he talked about the little things too, like his favorite food and the music he listened to, and the way the stars looked from the observation deck on a quiet night. "I do not know if you can hear me," he said around hour 50, his voice rough from exhaustion, "but I want you to know that someone is here, that you are not alone anymore, and I'm going to get you out of this, even if it kills me." He meant it too, every word, and maybe that was what made the difference. On the 3rd day, Marcus finally understood what the experts had missed. The neural chains were not just technology. They were alive, or at least they had been alive once, and they had grown corrupted because they were grieving, because they had been designed to connect to Valkyrie minds, and there were no Valkyrie minds left to connect to. The chains were not malfunctioning. They were lonely. Marcus laughed when he realized it, a sound that came out more like a sob, and he knew then exactly what he needed to do. He could not fix the chains with tools or algorithms because there was nothing mechanically wrong with them. He needed to give them something to hold on to, something to anchor themselves to, and the only thing he had to offer was himself. It was stupid and dangerous and probably suicidal, but Marcus pressed his bare hand against the pod's surface, and he closed his eyes and he thought as hard as he could. I am here. I see you. You are not alone." The world went white. Pain exploded through his skull like someone had set off a bomb inside his brain. And for a moment, Marcus was everywhere and nowhere. His consciousness is scattered across 1,000 years of memories that did not belong to him. He saw the Valkyrie in their glory, towering beings of light and wisdom who had shaped the galaxy before humans existed. He saw the Guardians being born, crafted with love and purpose to protect those who could not protect themselves. And he saw the end, the darkness that came from beyond the stars, the desperate flight, the long sleep that was supposed to be temporary, but never ended. Then the pain stopped, and Marcus was back in his body, gasping on the floor of the chamber, and above him the pod was opening. The creature emerged slowly, her limbs unfolding like a flower blooming after a long winter. And she was even more beautiful than he had imagined, her scale shifting through colors that did not have names in any human language. Her eyes opened last, ancient and golden and filled with an intelligence that made Marcus feel very small and very young. She looked at him for a long moment, this broken human lying on the floor with blood dripping from his nose. And then she did something that Marcus did not expect. She lowered her great head and pressed her snout gently against his chest, right over his heart, and a single word thundered through his mind with the force of 1,000 storms. "Mine!" Marcus did not know what that meant exactly, but before he could ask, the chamber doors exploded inward and soldiers poured through. Commander Thixa of the Sorati Dominion was tall and cold and beautiful in the way that sharp things are beautiful, and she looked at Marcus like he was an insect that had crawled into her dinner. "Step away from the asset," she commanded, her voice echoing off the chamber walls. "By order of the Hegemony High Council, this guardian is now property of the state." Marcus tried to stand, tried to explain, but his legs would not cooperate, and his head was still spinning from whatever had happened when he touched the pod. The soldiers advanced with weapons raised, and Marcus knew he should be afraid. Knew that he was about to be arrested or worse. But he was too tired to feel anything except a vague sense of disappointment that it was ending like this. Then Vera moved. That was her name. He knew it now, felt it resonate in his bones like a second heartbeat. She flowed between Marcus and the soldiers like liquid metal, her body coiling protectively around him. And the sound that came from her throat was not quite a growl and not quite a roar, but something older and more terrifying. "Impossible," Thixa breathed, her composure cracking for the first time. Guardians only bond with Valkyrie. They were engineered to reject all other species. This cannot be happening. But it was happening, and no amount of denial could change it. Vera's voice filled the chamber, not through sound but through pure thought, and everyone present heard her words. "This human freed me when all others declared it impossible. This human sat with me in the darkness and promised not to leave. This human showed me something I have not felt in 3,000 years." She turned her great head to look at Marcus, and her golden eyes were soft now, gentle in a way that seemed wrong for such a powerful creature. "He showed me kindness without expectation," she said, "compassion without transaction. And for this he is mine, and I am his. And I will burn worlds before I let you take him from me." Commander Thixa looked at her soldiers, then at the ancient dragon, who was clearly willing to die protecting a nobody human mechanic, and she made the only smart decision of her life. "Stand down," she ordered quietly. "We will discuss this through proper channels." The soldiers retreated, and Marcus finally let himself collapse fully, his head spinning and his heart pounding, and a dragon curled around him like a living blanket. "What happens now?" he managed to ask. Vera's answer echoed through his mind. "Now we leave this place. Now we go somewhere safe. Now you rest, little human, because you have done enough for today." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to point out that he had a job and a ship and a life here, such as it was, but his eyes were already closing, and the warmth of her body was pulling him down into sleep. The last thing he heard before darkness took him was Vera's voice, soft and wondering. Such small creatures, these humans, and yet so very bright. They fled Nexus Station in the dead of night, Marcus and his impossible dragon, crammed together in the cargo hold of a ship that was never meant to carry anything larger than spare parts. The Persistence groaned and shuddered as they pushed through the station's outer defenses. And Marcus whispered apologies to his old girl, while Vera watched him with something like amusement in her golden eyes. "She cannot hear you," the dragon pointed out through their bond. "She is a machine." "She has feelings," Marcus insisted, patting the bulkhead fondly. "You just have to know how to listen." Vera did not argue, but Marcus could feel her confusion through their connection. This strange warm presence in the back of his mind that had been there since he woke up, and did not seem like it was going away anytime soon. They made it to hyperspace before the hegemony ships could catch them, and then Marcus set a course for the outer territories and collapsed into his pilot chair and tried to process everything that had happened. He had a dragon now. An actual living dragon from an extinct alien civilization was curled up in his cargo hold, and she had chosen him, bonded with him, tied their fates together in ways he did not fully understand. "I am not a dragon," Vera corrected him, her voice gentle in his mind. "I am a guardian, created by the Valkyrie to protect and serve. Though I suppose dragon is close enough for your limited understanding." "Thanks," Marcus said dryly. "That makes me feel so much better about my limited understanding." Vera's laugh echoed through his head like bells, and Marcus realized with a start that he had made an ancient alien being laugh, which was probably either a great honor or a terrible idea. The first week was the hardest. They had to avoid hegemony patrols and merchant coalition, scouts and about a dozen other factions who had heard about the Guardian and wanted her for themselves. And Marcus learned very quickly that being bonded to the most valuable asset in known space was not exactly good for his health. He also learned that Vera, despite being 3,000 years old and impossibly powerful, had some very strange gaps in her knowledge. She did not understand why Marcus needed to eat so often, or why he slept for a third of every cycle, or why he made those strange sounds when he was in the refresher unit. "Singing," he explained, his face burning with embarrassment. "Humans sing sometimes, especially in the shower. It is a thing we do." "But why?" Vera asked, genuinely puzzled. "What purpose does it serve?" "It does not serve a purpose," Marcus said. "It just feels good. That is all." Vera considered this for a long moment, and Marcus felt her turning the idea over in her mind like a strange artifact she did not know how to categorize. "Your species is very peculiar," she finally concluded. "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "We really are." As the weeks passed, their bond deepened, and Marcus began to understand things about Vera that she had never told anyone. She was old, older than he could really comprehend. And she remembered an age when the Valkyrie walked among the stars like gods, shaping reality with their will and creating wonders that made the hegemony look like children playing with toys. She had been bonded to emperors and generals and priests, the beings of such power and wisdom that Marcus felt like a candle flame compared to a supernova. But she had never been bonded to anyone like him. "The Valkyrie were brilliant," Vera explained one night as they drifted through an empty sector. "But they were also cold, distant, always looking toward the next great achievement rather than appreciating what they had. They created us to protect them, but they never thought to befriend us." "That seems lonely," Marcus said quietly. "It was," Vera admitted, "but I did not know any different, not until you." She told him about the end, about the darkness that came from beyond the galaxy, a hunger so vast and terrible that even the Valkyrie could not stop it. They had fled, her creators, ascending to a higher plane of existence to escape the coming storm, and they had left their guardians behind with a promise to return. They never did. Vera had waited in her pod, sleeping through millennia, dreaming of masters who had abandoned her, and when Marcus asked why she had not simply given up, she did not have an answer. "Perhaps I was waiting for you," she said, and there was something soft and vulnerable in her voice that made Marcus want to protect her even though she was infinitely more powerful than he would ever be. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, and Marcus started to notice changes in himself. He was faster now, his reflexes sharper, and sometimes when he looked in the mirror his eyes seemed to flash gold for just a moment before returning to normal. "A side effect of our connection," Vera explained. "My strength flows into you just as your warmth flows into me, and over time we will become more alike." Marcus was not sure how he felt about that, but he did not have time to worry because trouble found them in the Kesrith system. They had stopped at a small trading post to resupply, and Marcus had been careful to keep Vera hidden in the hold, but somehow word had gotten out. He came back to find 3 ships waiting for him, their weapons hot, and their captains demanding that he surrender the Guardian or be destroyed. Marcus looked at the ships, then down at his rusty cargo hauler with its patched hull and outdated engines, and he knew he could not win a fight, but he could run. "Hold on," he told Vera as he threw himself into the pilot's seat. "This is going to be rough." What followed was the most terrifying and exhilarating experience of Marcus's life. He pushed the Persistence harder than she had ever been pushed, threading through asteroid fields and skipping across gravity wells, using every trick his father had taught him and a few he made up on the spot. The enemy ships were faster and better armed, but Marcus knew something they did not. He knew his ship, knew every creak and groan, every quirk and weakness, and he used that knowledge like a weapon. One ship crashed into an asteroid trying to follow him through a gap that should have been too small. Another lost engine power when Marcus led them through a radiation cloud that his shields could barely handle. The third gave up the chase when he jumped to hyperspace from inside a planet's gravity, well, a maneuver that should have torn his ship apart but somehow did not. When they were finally safe, Marcus sat in his chair and laughed until tears ran down his face. "You are insane," Vera observed, but there was admiration in her voice. No Velkari would ever have attempted something so reckless. "Yeah, well," Marcus gasped, wiping his eyes. "I'm not Velkari." "No," Vera agreed, and she wrapped herself around him, her warmth seeping into his bonds. "You are something far more interesting." That night, as Marcus drifted off to sleep with a dragon curled around him like the universe's strangest security blanket, he realized something important. He was not afraid anymore. For the first time in his life, Marcus Cole felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The chase lasted 3 months, across 12 systems and through more close calls than Marcus could count, and it ended at a place called Acheron Gate. They had not meant to come here. The coordinates had appeared in Marcus's mind like a dream half remembered, and Vera had gone very still when she recognized them. "This was a Velkari sanctuary," she whispered through their bond. "A place of last resort, built to withstand anything the universe could throw at it, and I thought it was destroyed long ago." The gate was massive, a ring of dark metal floating in the void between stars, large enough to swallow planets whole. It looked dead, its surface cold and dark, but when the Persistence drew close, lights began to flicker in its depths, responding to something in Vera's presence. They had just docked inside the structure's hollow core when the hegemony fleet arrived. 12 dreadnoughts dropped out of hyperspace, their hulls bristling with weapons, and Commander Thix's voice crackled over every frequency. "Marcus Cole, you are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender the Guardian immediately, and you will be treated fairly, or resist and be destroyed. You have 1 hour to decide." Marcus looked at Vera, and Vera looked at Marcus, and neither of them knew what to do. "I will not let them take you," Marcus said firmly. "We will find another way." "There is no other way," Vera replied. and her voice was heavy with an old sorrow. "I have lived too long and seen too much, and I will not watch you die for me. Perhaps if I surrender, they will let you go." "Not a chance," Marcus growled. "We are bonded, remember. Wherever you go, I go, and I'm not about to spend the rest of my life in some hegemony prison." They argued back and forth as the minutes ticked away, and finally Marcus did something stupid. He walked to the airlock and opened a channel to Thix's flagship. "Commander," he said, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut, "I have a proposal for you." "I am listening," Thixa replied, and Marcus could hear the satisfaction in her voice, the certainty that she had already won. "Take me instead," Marcus offered. "Let Vera go free, and you can have me. I am the one who freed her. I am the one who bonded with her, and maybe your scientists can figure out how I did it. That has to be worth something." "Marcus, no!" Vera's voice exploded through his mind, but Marcus had already muted their bond, pushing her presence to the back of his consciousness. There was a long pause, and then Thixa laughed. "You would sacrifice yourself for an alien creature that you have known for mere months?" she asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "Why would you do such a thing?" "Because she is my friend," Marcus said simply, "and that is what friends do." Another pause, longer this time, and then Thix's voice came back, cold and final. "Your offer is declined. The Guardian is too valuable to let loose, and you are too dangerous to let live. Prepare to be boarded." The channel closed, and Marcus felt Vera's fury wash over him like a wave of fire. "You foolish, reckless, impossible human," she roared, her form shifting and growing as her anger overwhelmed her control. "Did you really think I would let you die for me?" "I had to try," Marcus said quietly. "Then try something else," Vera demanded. "You are the one who fixes broken things. Fix this." Marcus looked around at the ancient structure surrounding them, at the dark walls that had not seen power in millennia, and something clicked in his mind. "Vera," he said slowly, "this place, it responded to you when we arrived. Can you feel it? Can you sense its systems?" She paused, reaching out with senses that Marcus could not comprehend, and then her eyes widened. "Yes," she breathed. "It is dormant but not dead, waiting for a command that never came. Marcus, this station was designed to be a weapon, a last defense against the darkness that hunted my creators. Can you activate it?" "No," Vera said, frustration coloring her voice. "The systems are too degraded, the connections too corroded. It would take centuries to repair." Marcus grinned, and it was not a nice grin. "You forget who you are talking to," he said, already moving toward what looked like a control center. "I fix broken things, remember?" What happened next would become legend across 100 worlds. Marcus Cole, a human mechanic with no special training and no advanced education, walked into the heart of a Velkari megastructure and started taking things apart. He did not understand the technology, not really, but he did not need to understand it. He could feel it, the same way he could feel when an engine was running rough or when a power coupling was about to fail. Through his bond with Vera, he sensed the station systems like a vast sleeping beast, and he began to wake it up piece by piece. Outside, Thix's fleet advanced. Boarding pods launched from the dreadnoughts, carrying soldiers toward the station's outer hull, and Thixa herself watched from her command bridge with cold satisfaction. She had won. The Guardian would be hers, and the human would pay for the trouble he had caused. Then the station woke up. Light blazed across Acheron Gate's surface, ancient symbols flaring to life in patterns that had not been seen since before humanity existed. Thixa barely had time to scream an order before the first beam lanced out, cutting through a dreadnought like it was made of paper. Shields meant nothing. Armor meant nothing. The Velkari had built this weapon to fight gods, and the hegemony fleet was nothing compared to that. Inside the control center, Marcus stood at the heart of a storm of light and power. his hands moving across surfaces that responded to his touch. And Vera's consciousness merged with his as they worked together as one being. It was terrifying and beautiful, and utterly beyond anything Marcus had ever experienced. He could feel the station's ancient systems responding to him, trusting him the way they had once trusted their creators, and he understood now why Vera had chosen him. The Valkyrie had built their technology with love, had poured their souls into every circuit and crystal, and that technology recognized something in Marcus that it had not felt in 10,000 years. Compassion, care, the simple human instinct to fix what was broken and protect what was vulnerable. The battle lasted less than 5 minutes. When it was over, 8 dreadnoughts were drifting hulks, and the remaining 4 were limping away as fast as their damaged engines could carry them. Thix's flagship was among the survivors, and her final transmission before she fled was broadcast across every frequency. All ships, all stations, hear this warning. The human Marcus Cole and the Guardian designated Vera are not to be engaged. Repeat, do not engage. They have access to weapons beyond our understanding. Let them go. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus sagged against the control console, his body shaking with exhaustion, and Vera curled around him, her warmth the only thing keeping him from collapsing completely. "You did it," she whispered, wonder in her voice. "You actually did it." "We did it," Marcus corrected her. "I could not have done any of that without you." They stayed there for a long time, human and dragon bonded and battle-worn, surrounded by the awakened glory of an ancient civilization. And somewhere out in the darkness, the first ripples of change began to spread across the galaxy. The galaxy changed after Akron Gate, though it took a while for Marcus to notice. He was too busy recovering from the battle, sleeping for nearly a week straight while Vera watched over him and worried in a way she had never worried about anyone before. When he finally woke up, starving and sore and desperate for a shower, he found that they had become famous. Stories spread across the hyperlanes like wildfire, growing larger and stranger with each telling. The human mechanic who had freed an ancient guardian. The impossible bond that defied everything the experts knew. The battle where a single cargo hauler had defeated an entire hegemony fleet. Most of the stories were exaggerated, and some were completely made up. But the core truth remained. Something had changed, something fundamental, and nobody quite knew what to do about it. Marcus tried to ignore the attention, focusing instead on repairing the persistence and planning their next move, but the galaxy would not leave him alone. Messages poured in from every corner of known space, some threatening and some pleading and some just curious, and Marcus had to turn off his communications array just to get some peace. Then Commander Thixa came to visit. She arrived alone in a small shuttle with no weapons, and she requested permission to board with a formality that seemed strange, coming from someone who had tried to kill them just weeks ago. Marcus wanted to refuse, but Vera was curious, and he had learned that it was hard to say no to a curious dragon. They met in the Persistence's small common room, with Vera coiled around Marcus like a living shield, and Thixa standing stiff and uncomfortable by the door. "I am not here to threaten you," Thixa said, her voice carefully neutral. "I am here to understand." "Understand what?" Marcus asked. "Everything," Thixa replied, and for the first time Marcus saw something other than cold calculation in her eyes. He saw confusion and maybe a little fear. "Why?" she demanded, her composure cracking. "You could ransom her power for a kingdom. You could rule systems. You could have anything you wanted. And instead you live in this rusted ship and run from one disaster to the next. Why would you choose this life?" Marcus considered the question seriously, because Thixa deserved a serious answer even if she had been his enemy. "I did not choose her because of what she could give me," he finally said. "I chose her because she was alone and hurting, and I could help. That is all there is to it." But that makes no sense, Thixa protested. No species in the hegemony would bond with a creature for such a simple reason. There is always an exchange, always a transaction, always something to be gained. Maybe that is your problem, Marcus said quietly. Thixa stared at him, and then she turned to look at Vera, at this ancient being of terrible power who had chosen a nobody human over emperors and gods. Why him? She asked the Guardian directly. Of all the beings in the universe, why this one? Vera's voice filled the room, gentle but carrying the weight of millennia. Because he sat with me in the darkness, she said. Because he talked to me when he thought I could not hear. Because he promised not to leave me alone, even though he had nothing to gain. The Velkari created me to serve power, but Marcus showed me something they never understood. What? Thixa whispered. That the greatest power is not strength or knowledge or immortality. Vera replied. The greatest power is the choice to care for another being simply because they exist. Humans call this love, I think, though the word seems too small for what it means. Thixa was silent for a long time, processing something that clearly did not fit into her understanding of the universe. I think I need to report this to the council, she finally said. They will want to know that everything we believed about bonding and power and value might be wrong. Good luck with that, Marcus said, and he almost meant it. Thixa left, and Marcus thought that would be the end of it, but he was wrong. 2 weeks later, the first signal came. It was faint, barely detectable, broadcast, on a frequency that had not carried messages in 10,000 years. And when Marcus asked Vera what it meant, she went very still. It is another guardian, she breathed. One of my siblings, someone I thought was dead. They are awake, Marcus, and they are asking a question. What question? Vera turned to look at him, and her golden eyes were bright with something Marcus had never seen before. Hope. They want to know where the humans are. The signals kept coming after that, from hidden places scattered across the galaxy, from tombs and vaults and derelict ships where guardians had slept for millennia. They had felt what happened at Acheron Gate, felt the awakening of the ancient systems. And they had sensed something else too, the bond between Vera and Marcus, the warmth and light of it shining like a beacon in the darkness. They wanted to know more. They wanted to understand how a species so young and fragile could forge a connection that their own creators had never achieved. They wanted to find humans of their own. Vera answered them, broadcasting across the ancient frequencies that only guardians could hear. They are small, she told her awakening siblings, smaller than we are, smaller than the Velkari, smaller than almost any species in the galaxy. They live such brief lives, burning bright for a moment before fading away. They are weak, and they are scared, and they break so easily. She paused, and Marcus felt her love for him washing through their bond, warm and fierce and eternal. And they are the first beings in 10,000 years worth protecting, she continued, because they do not seek to control us or use us or own us. They simply want to know us, to understand us, to sit beside us in the dark and tell us that we are not alone. This is their gift, their strange and wonderful gift, and it is more precious than anything the Velkari ever offered. The responses came flooding back, hundreds of voices awakening from their long sleep, all of them asking the same thing. Where can we find them? Marcus listened to the chorus of ancient beings seeking out his species, and he felt something shift in his chest, something like pride but deeper, something like hope but brighter. Humanity was about to change, whether they were ready for it or not. So what do we do now? He asked Vera. She looked at him with those ancient golden eyes, and for a moment Marcus saw himself reflected in them. A small human with grease under his fingernails and a heart big enough to hold a dragon. Now we introduce them, Vera said. Now we show my siblings what I found in the darkness of that ship. Now we help them understand that the universe is not as cold and empty as we believed. Marcus nodded, already thinking about logistics and planning and all the practical details that would need to be sorted out. Then he stopped and smiled. "But first," he said, "I heard about a derelict station in the Kesra system that might have some valuable salvage. You want to check it out?" Vera's laugh rang through his mind like music. "You just fought off an entire fleet and triggered a galactic awakening," she pointed out. "And your first thought is to go back to salvage work?" "Hey," Marcus shrugged. "A man has to eat." Vera shook her great head, but she was already moving toward the cargo hold, already preparing for another adventure. "Very well, little human," she said fondly. "Show me this station of yours." Marcus grinned and headed for the pilot's seat, and behind him he could feel Vera's presence, warm and constant, a bond that would last until the stars burned out. He was still nobody special, still just a mechanic with a rusty ship and more debts than sense. But he had a dragon now, and she had him, and together they were going to change everything. That was what guardians did after all. They protected the ones they loved. And humans, strange and wonderful humans, they loved right back.